Amen.
Thank you, everyone. We'll start with the agenda approvals. Any changes, additions from staff?
Mayor and Council, a couple items of note. One, I would like to add one item to the agenda formally, just a Charter Commission update, if we could do that under 11C. And then just two other notes. When we look at the upcoming agenda, I'll ask the council to potentially schedule a work session to discuss those residential zoning districts related to structure size. And then just a final note that Val Nybo is unable to be here today. She has a JC's meeting at the same time.
Okay. Anything from council? Any additions, changes? Okay, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda as modified.
So moved.
Oh,
Yeah,
moved.
Anderson.
Second, Bottom.
Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Thomas, aye. Bottom.
Aye.
Anderson,
Aye.
Lothar,
Aye.
and Schultz. I think you're muted, Alan. Alan, you're still muted. You hearing us, Alan? Hey, you're muted. There you go.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Okay, commission representatives, Commissioner Dickman is here from the Planning Commission, and Val, as Brad mentioned, Val Nybo is not able to attend, so she won't be here. Open forum, it's time for anyone who wishes to make statements on open forum to be recognized, and Jessica will put you on. Jessica, you want to give them a rundown on what they have to do so everybody can know?
Thanks, Mayor. For those wanting to participate in the open forum and public comment, you can do so by pressing *9 if you're joining us via phone. Otherwise, you can use the click on the participants button and then the raise your hand function under there. Items on the open forum are generally items not on the agenda. Otherwise, we will have some public comment times at other places in the meeting. But anyone, we do have one person who's raising their hand, so I will unmute you, Linnea. I believe I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. If you could state your name and address for the record.
Yes, my name is Linnea Bosma, and I live at 6215 Hackamore Circle.
Perfect, thank you.
I'm just wondering if there's any update on the Hackamore Road project. I've tried to make a couple phone calls, I've sent some emails, and I'm not getting any response back from anybody. And I'm just curious as to where that's at this point.
Okay, I guess we can give you, typically we don't respond on open forum items because people are usually just making statements, but Brad, maybe you can just give a quick update on the status of that.
Sure. So Mayor and Council, you might be aware that we had 30% design plans back a couple months ago. And this was a joint project for design with the cities of Corcoran and Medina. The city of Medina actually voted to discontinue any sort of planning efforts with the city of Corcoran. So at the staff level, we've had some conversation. Ultimately, some improvements would take place if development proceeds. Without development, it's really for Medina to work with Corcoran to continue those forward. So at the staff level, we talked. I know Mayor Thomas as well as the Mayor of Medina are going to be meeting in sometime in the near future to have those discussions as well. But they're basically on hold for the time being. And you could, Linnea, you can certainly email me or call me if you want updates further as well.
Yeah, basically Medina, after a couple of years of supporting it, has pulled their support for the project. So we're kind of left sitting high and dry on it, and we'll see what we can do.
So Mayor Thomas, can I ask you a question about that?
Certainly.
So are they saying that because we put new development on Hackamore that we're responsible for all of the wear and tear that the Medina residents put on Hackamore for the previous 20 years when we didn't have any development on Hackamore?
I'm not sure they're even that sophisticated with their response. I think they're just saying they're not going to play in the sandbox, but this is what I'm seeing. But we're waiting. We're trying to get a meeting set up with mayor, with the Medina mayor, and see what, just find out what their position really is. I'm not sure. It was not a unanimous decision on the council, their council's part. So we just have to find out.
Okay. Fair enough. Thank you.
You may summarize. You summarize it pretty well, John, but I'm not sure that that's their open stance on it.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Anybody else for open forum, Jessica?
Mayor, at this time, no one else has raised their hand.
Okay, we'll give it another few seconds here. If anybody else wishes to be on open forum, be recognized, Jessica will put you on.
And I will just note we have an unfinished business period, a new business comment period, and actually there is an open hearing for people who wanted to talk directly at the body camera item later on.
Okay, hearing
No
none,
one
we'll
else
move
has
on.
raised. Yep.
We'll move on with our agenda. Our first item is or the next item is our presentation recognitions, and we have a recognition for Pete Eckenberg, who is Officer Eckenberg, who has been with us for 5 years now, and I assume that Matt or Brad wants to say something on that.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Officer Peter Eckenberg came to the city with 12 years of experience. He started his career working with the Pipestone County Sheriff's Office for 4 years, Carver County with 8 years before joining our team in August of 2015. Those 5 years have really flown by since then. And as with all of our officers, his role in the community extends far beyond that of the traditional serve and protect that other police departments provide. His outgoing personality has been a huge asset to the department and the community. And he's taken on projects like being the lead planner of our growing Night to Unite event that you've seen over the last 5 years. And while we won't get to see the traditional big event this year, he's been continuing to connect the community through his work on social media sites like Nextdoor, our department's Facebook and Twitter feeds. He also does work in the community as far as working on safety and emergency plans with some of our local churches and schools, and has been a regular visitor with other schools in the area. Pete works as our certified car seat technician and also does the alcohol and tobacco compliance checks at our local businesses. So in addition to that, he helps with a lot of the day-to-day IT stuff and updating our digital forms. So he wears a lot of hats in the department, and we want to thank you, Pete, for all the great work you do with the city and for our residents and within the police department. So congratulations on your 5 years with us.
I certainly want to echo that. I know the interfacing that I've done with Pete has been nothing but a very, very positive, high energy, and just a pleasant experience from my perspective. And I really appreciate that a lot. It kind of goes across the board with the our police department, but Pete's certainly up on the upper end of the scale on pleasant personalities, and just seems to be a really good all-around good guy. So
Can I add? Can I add to that too?
Yep, wish you would.
I've seen Pete at City Hall come in off hours, put on his uniform, and attend meetings with civic organizations. I've seen him go above and beyond what is expected of a police officer. And it's not just a job. It's evident it's not just a job for him. It's something he enjoys and puts a lot of passion and heart into it. And I really appreciate that he's with our town.
You're here.
Thank you, Pete.
Thank you, Pete.
Well, this would be the time that we'd walk up and give you something and bump your elbow or something, but given the nature of what goes on here, thank you very much.
Thank you, Pete.
Thanks, Pete.
Well done.
Can't even have Sue take your picture, so it's really kind of sad, but hopefully we'll get beyond this. So, okay, I'll move on to the consent agenda. Does anyone wish to pull any of the items from the consent agenda consisting of item 7A through D? I would like to pull item C just to more openly recognize the contributors in there. But anyone wish to pull anything else? Okay, here and none, I'll entertain a motion to approve consent agenda items 7A, B, and D as presented.
So moved, Bottom.
Second, Schultz.
Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Thomas, aye. Anderson,
Aye.
Bodema,
Aye.
Lothar,
Aye.
and Schultz.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Item 7C is it's a donation resolution for COVID-19 items. Let me see if I can find it now that I pulled it. And I just wanted to, it's a short list, and I just wanted to name off the people who had participated just to recognize them a little bit. And I don't have it here.
I can read it. I have it, Ron.
Could you do that?
Yep.
I must have
Corcoran.
pulled it out of my thing and stuck it in the wrong place. So if you would do that, John, I'd appreciate it.
Yep. Corcoran Crossroads, 25-2 Solutions, J. Carver Distillery, Northwest Nighthawks, Tattersall Distilling, Jody Liche, sorry, Tide Cleaners, Linda Apfel, Nighthawks, again, Ballistic Products, and Peg's Countryside Kitchen.
Great, thanks, John. I did find it now, so I can at least read the resolution. It's resolution 2020-60. It's a resolution recognizing donations. Whereas as the world is facing a global pandemic related to COVID-19, and whereas Corcoran and the greater Minneapolis region has recently observed civil unrest, and whereas the city of Corcoran declared an emergency on March 20th, 2020, and whereas the continued efforts against the COVID-19 pandemic and civil unrest is a direct result of support from the City Council, community business, and the City of Corcoran employees, community groups, and other donors. And whereas the Exhibit A outlines the in-kind contribution to the City of Corcoran to be utilized in response to COVID-19 and civil unrest. This is what John just read off. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the City Council of the City of Corcoran acknowledges the outstanding efforts by the city staff and the generosity of all donors, and graciously accepts the in-kind donations as listed. So I'll entertain a motion to approve resolution as stated.
I so moved. Lothar.
Second, Bodema.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Thomas, aye. Schultz,
Aye.
Lothar,
Aye.
Anderson,
Aye.
and Bodema.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so now we'll move on to, we have no planning business, so there's no need for anything on that. Unfinished business, which will consist of the liquor license fee review. And at this time, we'll take public comment. So anyone wishing to be recognized can let Jessica know, and she'll put you on. And again, you hit *9 or raise your hand on the Zoom screen.
Mayor, at this time, we don't have anyone raising their hand, but we can wait just a few moments.
Wait a second, yeah, just because it can be confusing. Okay, nobody?
At this time, we have no one.
Okay, well, let's move on then. We have item 9A, which is the liquor license fee review. And Brad, I assume you'll give us a lead in on that?
Jessica, yep.
Or Jessica?
Thanks, Mayor and Council. So in April, we reviewed liquor license renewals, and we looked at a few different options for that with the pandemic. So we did receive a request from one of the liquor licensees about renewal and payment, and we looked at those in April. And the major ways that we could handle fees were to make no changes, to approve conditional liquor licenses with fees due later, do a one-time reduction in fees, or do a combination of that conditional renewal with fees due in the future and a potential reduction in fees. Reviewing that in the future. So we're at now that we're into August, that's what we're really here looking at today. And so when we looked at those options in the past, we just moved out that timeline for fees, and looking at where we're at now. I'm recommending that we're 6 months into the pandemic and our bars and restaurants are limited to a 50% capacity, which limits their staff and patrons. And I think that it's reasonable to allow for a 3-month reduction in fees for those establishments. We'd be looking at approximately $1,000 for our full on sale, with a slightly lower reduction for those who have a wine or just a wine licenses or other option. And so this would have a reduce our fees that we're bringing in, but as a way to accommodate our businesses, that would be our recommendation at this point. And I would at this time take any questions that the council might have.
Okay, I guess my lead in on that would be I certainly support a reduction. One of the things that it's kind of an interactive issue here, and we'll be discussing it on the on item 10B, the CARES Act funding goals. And I guess what I'm wondering is if we can't use one of the options that we have that I'm going to propose that we discuss. I'm not sure where I fall on it, but we can use some of that money to reimburse businesses for their lost revenue or their stuff that's happened to them. And other cities are doing that. I know one city has got a $3,000 per business maximum, and they have to apply for it and that sort of thing. And I guess where I'm at right now is I would suggest we go ahead and do the reduction in the liquor fees, but then I'd also like to discuss any further things. And the only thing I'm wondering is if we couldn't run the liquor fee reduction through the CARES Act, through those funds, but that's
Mr. Mayor, no, the guidance specifically has been cities cannot use lost revenue. So this would be lost revenue from the city, and that is not an eligible use of the CARE funds. So we could do our own programs like others are, but we couldn't backfill this.
And the problem, and there's more to it than just doing our own program. It takes administration of it, setting it up and all that. And it'd be a fair amount of work. That's why I don't want to jump into that. But I suspect we could have, if we had a program, we could have that under one of the reimbursable goals, and then it wouldn't be a lost revenue thing. It would be just part of their application for that program. But that's getting a little bit too cute at this stage. And I guess I would more support that we go ahead with this, and then we can discuss the CARES funding stuff as a separate issue. So that's how I feel. I would recommend we take staff's recommendation, open to suggestions. So anybody, other comments?
I had the same basic question with regards to if it could be covered under the CARES Act. But I guess I have a naive question. I'm not up on what the current regulations are for bars and restaurants. So they can only have 50% capacity. Is that inside or only outside?
Phase 3 lists 50% capacity. I think that's both inside and outside. I could verify that, though. I looked at, while I was writing the staff report, I looked at the state guidance, and I believe I can double check on that for you.
It's 50%. It's inside. It's inside as well as outside. I don't know if.
Okay.
I know the bars are able to have people inside at 50% capacity. So.
And what does our liquor license dates run through? It's not a calendar year, right? It's a off year.
Yeah, so it's it's July 1st to June 30th. So this would be for the year, the renewal that just happened July 1st.
Okay. So this would be a one-time reduction up through this point.
It would be a one-time reduction up to this point. We weren't necessarily looking backwards because the pandemic started in the last last license renewal, which we had already collected the fees. So this is a way to kind of spread that. Spread that out.
I'm more forward thinking in that what happens if the pandemic continues as is or increases and we have further restrictions by the state, and now we've lost outside seating for these places, and how would that affect them? But if we're looking at just a one-time deal right now, I have no problem with it.
That's what I was anticipating, is just a one-time reduction, just to provide some relief to
And Alan, is your point that
organizations.
you'd like to discuss it more comprehensively as well?
Well, yeah, more of a comprehensive discussion in with the CARES Act, or it might be something we want to consider, come December or January 1st again, if we have further lockdown and then now they're back down to 10% capacity or something like that,
Right. Yeah, and one of the regulars to that, the CARES Act has to be spent by November, so that's, you can't wait till December for that. But it's it's a large, broad discussion. So okay, thanks, Al. Anyone else?
Is this reduction technically to go through the end of next June, or is it just the end of this year, or how does that work?
It would be for this liquor license renewal period, so the 12 months from July 1, 2020. So we would just do, rather than getting the full $4,000, we get a $3,000 for.
Okay.
So some of our establishments have paid the fees, so we would have to potentially do a refund for one or two of the establishments, although others have not. When we currently do have one establishment that has not actually renewed their license, the 1050 Club has not renewed, and this could potentially
assist them
in doing so. And Alan, to your question, indoors, it does look like it does not say whether it is indoors or outdoors, but the capacity is just 50%.
Okay.
It says both.
My understanding is that it's 50% of the original capacity, but then you could use outdoor space to accommodate what that 50% is. And just regarded one more comment on this, would be a 2020 budget impact as far as when the revenue comes in, but I think we're fiscally strong enough to withstand a little bit of impact.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to accept staff's recommendation and offer a 3-month rebate or reduction in liquor license fees to all of our establishments in Corcoran.
So moved. Schultz.
Second, Bottom.
Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Thomas, aye. Anderson.
Aye.
Bottom.
Aye.
Lothar.
Aye.
And Schultz.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If there's a lag between people making motions and me asking for the results, it's because I'm used to just people speaking up when I start doing it. And I need to get my brain around this formalized polling of people. So, so I apologize if that seems awkward.
So does having a meeting when we're all at chairs in our house seems a little awkward too.
Yeah, it's
an awkward time.
Yeah, it is that. Okay, now we'll move on to new business, which is going to consist of the body camera policy, public hearing and adoption, the CARES Act funding goals, unreserved fund balance policy, bond refunding and call opportunities, and 2021 capital improvement plan purchases. So anyone wishing to speak to those items at this time, please be recognized by Jessica and she'll put you on. And you can do that by pressing *9 on your phone or the raise hand function on the Zoom screen.
I will just note at the first item, the body camera public hearing and adoption, there we will open specifically for that item. So perhaps people just on the CARES Act unreserved policy, and we'll acknowledge you at the body camera discussion just shortly for if it's that topic.
Yeah, good point, Brad. Yeah, so don't weigh in on the body camera issue right now because we'll have an open hearing for that.
I think that we should, Matt, if you're going to make a comment on body cameras, I hope they're a little better than the camera that's actually on you right now.
Some
It's like a Atari. I feel like I'm watching Matt.
Okay,
an
John,
Atari vision.
it's time for the public to give comments now, not the council. Is anyone raising their hand, Jessica?
I do not see anyone raising their hand at this time. Thank you.
We'll give it a minute here. Just now that John butted in on them and threw them off their stride. Okay, since no one has asked to be recognized, we'll move on with item 10A, which is the body camera policy public hearing and adoption. Do we start that with the public hearing, or do we?
Well, I'd like to have Matt present first, and
Yeah,
that way
okay.
it might answer
Might answer
questions
questions,
or
right?
cause questions.
Right.
All right. Thank you, Mayor and Council. Yeah, for some reason, Zoom doesn't seem to like the camera in my office. And as John pointed out, we have a need for some new cameras in the police department. But on the squad and body camera project, this is an update. We started this in February 13th, 2020. You'll remember the council meeting. Staff presented our plan for implementing a new squad and body camera system. And at that meeting on the 13th, we went over the history, the operational impact, potential issues, along with the project's cost and timeline. So we really went through the merits of the program and the equipment at that time. And then the promise was to bring back to you the policy that you could view that prior to approving the purchase. So the funds were included in the 2020 CIP. As we noted earlier, the squad cameras are beyond end of life and end of support, and it only made sense to consider the body cameras as part of the new solution, and that's when we looked at it as a whole suite. And they were also able to figure in new recording cameras for the interview rooms in the police department as part of the same system. And that's one of the things that as IT develops, everybody has their new system and software, and we just also don't have the bandwidth to manage multiple systems. So it makes sense to be able to try and do it on one platform. So we spent over 4 years looking into different systems, and we identified to meet the city's needs, probably the best value with WatchGuard. We spent the last 6 months since the February meeting working on developing the attached draft policy that guides our agency's use of it. But a lot of the meat and potatoes of the policy is really defined in state statutes that were attached to the staff report. And if you were able to review those, you were able to see where they kind of showed up in the policy itself. And then staff's work really was taking a look at a lot of other agencies on some of their best practices, how they were rolling out their system and how they were using it, and applying those to our city in a way that fit. And then also updating the language in the policy to match our staffing and our structure and our procedures. So we completed that policy. It was vetted by the city attorney. It was posted to the city website on August 5th. We also posted a link on our social media accounts on August 6th. And at this point, all of those indicated it was open for public comment. We have not received any public comment via email or the social media sites other than a handful of thumbs up on Facebook. But so I'd be looking to take any comment from the council, and I would ask the council to hold a public comment period at I guess either before or after your questions. And then again, an update since the initial report in February. The original price from WatchGuard was $104,500. And we were able to get that cost reduced down to $99,260. And as always, we'll keep working on that and keep trying to do better as if the opportunity presents itself. So I'm willing to take any questions that you might have, and then would also ask that you hold a public comment period. And if you're satisfied with the policy and public comment period, then also approve the purchase from WatchGuard and direct staff to implement the new system. So happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Matt. Why don't we start out with the council asking any factual or background questions, and then we can open the public hearing, get public comments. And if there's any off of that, then we can finish up with council questions and comments. So anything from the council, any questions, observations?
I can speak to that just for a second. Matt and I think Ryan and I had extensive conversations back in February or March. So it's a heavy topic, and I don't want people to think that we haven't talked about it or thought about it, but this is a process of something that started six months ago now. So I don't have any questions. I've been asking them and getting clarification a long time as we've discussed this.
And I think that's a good point, John, is this is not something we're just addressing tonight. We've been looking at this for quite some time, and staff has been digging into this a lot. So anything else from council?
I just have a question for Matt. I thought it was very thorough and easy to understand. I just want to clarify one thing. What's the policy with regards to release of video for officer-involved shooting or use of force incidents? That always seems to come up in the media where the public demands a release of video, and I just want to understand what our policy is with regards to that.
Sure. So there is so basically there are exceptions in the law for typically that would be a case initially that's under investigation. So typically cases that are under investigation from the onset, the data doesn't become public because it can taint jury pools, or it can sway if you only release part of the evidence but you don't see the whole picture. But as we know, society really places a strong emphasis on the video evidence, which is an important part of the entire case. So there are exceptions in there that it can be released to quell public unrest and other certain scenarios, and that's really written into statute. So any release of that information is really coordinated with the attorneys involved in the case. So it would not be simply just based on the city, but there would be a joint decision based on the specific circumstances of that instance. So it doesn't have a clear cut can or cannot be released. It is technically part of an ongoing investigation and is typically not released unless there is a public safety need to have it released in advance.
And who in Corcoran makes that decision then?
That would be
city staff.
Sure. So that would probably be it would obviously be in consultation with the prosecuting attorney, but also the director of public safety and I guess the people that have the details of the case and are required to have it because of the position they're in.
Okay. So it's not a decision of the council or the mayor, so there's no pressure on elected officials. It all comes back to.
Correct. And it would also be, I'm guessing the city attorney would probably play the largest role in that discussion.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Anyone else?
Yeah, I just want to say that the care that you've done, that you've used in putting this together to make sure that what we have as our rules are in agreement with the state law, and is really important. And I think you've done that, and also that you have used the experience of other communities rather than try and invent the wheel. That you've taken good advantage of other communities' experience. I think that will serve us very well. Appreciate the job well done, Matt.
Yes.
Thank you. That was one of the things that was one of the reasons why we weren't one of the early adopters, is there's a lot of moving pieces, and we also wanted to wait until a lot of these changes got vetted out in state statute. As you know, the legislation came out a couple of years back on it, and we really, as much as we see the value in it, knew that we needed to wait until the dust had settled. And a big part of it was making sure that our residents were protected with the data classifications that the state came up with. We certainly don't want to be releasing data that would compromise people's privacy or security. And we feel that this got to a safe balance for the residents, and also is a great benefit for the community as it relates to transparency, but also evidentiary for criminal cases.
Thanks, Tom. Any other questions,
I-
observations?
Yeah, I just had one question in terms of replacement of, body cameras and so forth. Is there a standard length of time that X amount of hours type of thing when something becomes more obsolete and needs to be replaced? Is there some kind of standard, industry standard there?
No, it really varies a lot. And that was, in part of the staff report, you'll see that I referenced, it's hard to make apples to apples comparisons, because in some of them you own the equipment outright. In other ones, they want you to sign up for an agreement where they lock you into a subscription, and that includes equipment and services that go along with it. And So it's really complex, and nearly every single one of the vendors does it a little bit differently. So, and it really depends on the equipment and the initial quality. And I think obviously here, starting out with a new system, we're going to be in good shape for a while, but my hope would be that we would then be able to move to a position of ongoing maintenance where we take smaller bites over time, like as far as replacing 2 cameras at a time, similar to what you'll see if we talk about taser replacement and some of those things that we can roll in the maintenance and upkeep and replacement into the operating budget. But there shouldn't be a need for that for a couple of years yet, but that would be my vision right now.
Okay.
Okay, if there's no other observation from the council, I'll open the public hearing. So anyone who wishes to speak at the public hearing on this specific issue, please be recognized by Jessica by pushing *9 on your phone or the raise hand function on the Zoom screen.
Thank you, Mayor. We do have one individual, Jeremy Nichols. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you if you want to go ahead and state your name and address for the record.
Hi, my name is Jeremy Nichols. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Very good. I live at 6334 Steeplechase. And I just wanted to congratulate Matt on selecting what appears to be a really good system. I was very pleased to see the relatively low ongoing cost of ownership of the system. I know a lot of them, like he mentioned, are relatively expensive on an ongoing basis. And I think it's prudent to select one that is so cost effective long term, and that it's all integrated into one system, I think is also very helpful. And also, I wanted to congratulate the city on selecting something that will help to protect officers and citizens, officers especially from false accusation and the consequences of things that might be misconstrued after the fact. And citizens are always benefited by things like this, just by keeping everybody honest and knowing that they're going to be recorded too. I also appreciated the clarity of the policy that was drafted and how detailed it is in addressing so many different elements. I wanted to raise one relatively minor concern. In looking at the website for the manufacturer, it seems to indicate that this camera system has a continuous recording function. So you can go back in case an officer mistakenly forgot to activate the system, and it's continuously recording on a buffer that can be recovered days after the fact. But I didn't see in the policy any guidance for how that would be accessed if it were deemed necessary after the fact. So that might be something to consider before the policy is finalized. And that's all I had. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jeremy. Is anyone else, Jessica?
No one else has raised their hand. If you'd like, we could give it just a moment.
We'll wait a bit. Yeah.
Again, for those wanting to participate, you can press *9 if you're on your phone, or use the raise hand function listed under the participant button at the bottom of your screen. No one else has raised their hand. If you'd like to.
Okay, seeing no one wishing to participate, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved. John.
Second, Lothar.
Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye. Thomas, aye. Anderson,
Aye.
Bodema,
Aye.
Lothar,
Aye.
and Schultz.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Matt, do you want to respond to that issue of the continuous record retention and disclosure?
Sure. Yeah, no, absolutely. I appreciate your attention to detail on it, Mr. Nichols, and your feedback. Obviously, we put a lot of time and work into it. And that was a topic of conversation. As you know, from looking into it, there's a lot of implications, even just making a small tweak as far as whether you have a 30-second pre-record or a long-term pre-record. And the reason that it wasn't addressed specifically in this is that the information contained as part of the pre-record, a lot of them have an instant. If you click record, it'll include the 30 seconds prior, and that data would be managed simply as the rest of the camera data is included, and be treated the exact same way as far as pre-record data. At this time, whether or not there is, as far as trying to be clear on how the data is managed, it would be managed under the same expectations as all of the camera data. And there's also an important distinction whether you're referring to, for instance, a squad car data, squad car doing that, a lot of that would be the pre-record would be maintained on board. There's not a lot of drain on the system, and there's also not an expectation of privacy as it relates to that. Typically, it's something you'd see in the public street or somebody walking by. So there's a lot less privacy concerns as it relates to squad car pre-record. And typically, you'll see a lot of those where they'll say you can go back 24 hours if, for instance, a business is burglarized that the officer drove by earlier in the night. That pre-record data would be managed in the same way. It's only retrievable within 24 hours usually from the device itself. Whereas the body camera data, typically at this point and looking at it, because of the storage, and really it has a significant impact on battery life for the device. So we're a little bit hesitant to go into a long-term pre-record just because of how quickly it drains the battery on the body-worn camera stuff. And it's also a little bit of a moving target because as there become new iterations, the body cameras their batteries will improve. They'll be better able to absorb those changes, but also the data management will change. So if we're storing those things, they have a less ability to store the pre-record on the onboard smaller body cameras. It's a little more onerous on the device itself. Than it would be on it, for instance, a squad system, which has the full car's electrical system for the depth and bandwidth of it. So it's something that we paid attention to, but I think for as far as the data management is concerned at this point, it would be basically for the squad cars be included just in the traditional data management standpoint. And the pre-record right now on the body-worn cameras, we're a little bit hesitant to jump into unless there's a short-term solution. And as you'll know, in looking at the website, the new model that they're switching to, the V300, as of when we were last getting the quotes, they're still dialing in as completely how all of those capabilities play out. But it's certainly something that we're keeping at the forefront in looking at it.
Okay, thanks, Matt. There's obviously a lot of details here. So, any other questions from staff or from council? Okay, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to direct staff to finalize the portable audio video recording systems policy as presented, approve the purchase from WatchGuard, and direct staff to implement the new system.
So moved, Anderson.
Second, Schultz.
Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Thomas, aye. Anderson,
Aye.
Bodema,
Aye.
Lothar,
Aye.
and Schultz.
Aye.
Okay, thank you, and thank you, Matt, for the job well done, and for all the people who were involved in this process.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
Thanks, Matt.
Nice job.
Okay, now we'll move on to item 10B, which is the CARES Act funding goals.
Forgot to unmute myself there for a second. Mayor and Council, I do have a couple slides here Jess is getting to, but essentially the city of Corcoran did receive almost $440,000 of CARES Act funding. And we have until November 15th to use those funds. There's 3 real rules as far as the use. They have to be related to the pandemic. They have to be incurred between March 1st. The second one is they have to be not previously budgeted for. However, there is a caveat where staff salaries for public safety can be used for this. And they have to be incurred between March 1st and spent by November 15th. So right now we've certainly had expenditures related to personal protective equipment, technology, and a few others, but we certainly have remaining funds for use that looking for some guidance for staff. So the remaining really guidance is previously I talked about broadband, for example. And the one thing I found by looking into that is really the timeline is really compressed for getting a project completed by November 15th that staff could stand behind. The attorney has stated some concerns on whether it really is an eligible expense. I think we could get there. So really it's the time that is the issue with that project for these specific funds. And as we develop our final plan to send to you, I wanted to ask the council specifically regarding the category of economic support programs. Right now, what we would probably have to update our EDA and amend its documents and we would have to really hire somebody to help us with those programs, but we could do something if we really wanted to help reimburse some companies for any cost they've had for some of the COVID expenses. Next slide, Jess. Sorry, I thought I had different stuff in there, but essentially I will add that, you know, the county has programs. We have not had an assistance asked for from the businesses themselves. And just kind of further here, my recommendation here, the staff recommendation here, is to spend those funds internally. We believe we can use up the funds. And potentially, if we have our budget in a really good fiscal shape, we ourselves could do a program without any of the tag-alongs that come with federal or state programs that we could do on our own and not be subject to those. So that's a recommendation for now. However, if the council wants to earmark a certain amount of money for something else, we would just reduce the amount of money we'd spend internally. So that's really the purpose, to provide direction on whether the council wants to specifically create a economic support program and complete it by November 15th, or spend internally and consider doing something more in our own timeline following. Happy to answer any questions.
So Brad, if we use the CARES money to do some of the internal things, I know it's got to be directly related to COVID and it can't have been budgeted before, but will the net result of that probably end up giving us a stronger position with our budget than we would have expected otherwise? I think you're muted, Brad.
It certainly would, and as well, because of some of the actions we've taken. For example, we put off some hiring because we didn't know how fiscally we were going to be. We would likely have some funds at the end of this year that could be eligible to do anything we wanted to do with them, to be creative for our community versus being tied to this specific legislation.
Yeah. I know Dayton is trying to push forward and do the internet, the Wi-Fi towers and that sort of thing. And I spoke with Tim McNeil last night on it a little bit, and in my opinion, I think they're getting ahead of their skis a little bit, in that you really want to have really vetted out the supplier of that functionality, because you can end up with a monopoly, and whether it's a good company or not a reliable company, you're dependent on them. And I think to put a program like that in place before November, I think is almost impossible to do a valid job of it. So I don't support that in the short term. I would like to see us positioned to get involved with that in a longer term basis. And for all those reasons, and the complexity of setting up a program for businesses, I think I agree with staff on that. I think it's a lot of work to do it. They have other means to get there, and I think if we are in a stronger position on our budget than we would have expected because of some of the just things that are happening, we may be in a position to help out some of the businesses without the federal red tape. So, so my tendency is to take staff's recommendation. I'd certainly be open to suggestions or comments or observations from the council, though. So anyone else wants to weigh in?
I'm wondering, Brad, if any of the local businesses have raised their hands and asked for some particular support.
I polled around with staff and no one was aware of anything.
Okay.
I know as far as challenges go, obviously the service industry was hit exceptionally hard. So for Corcoran, that's a relatively small but intense for those individuals. You know, looking around and talking to many of the business owners during the shutdown, most everyone else in Corcoran kept going. I mean, construction industries were busy, manufacturing industries were busy. So I don't know if anyone else really was shut down in Corcoran other than the bar restaurant industry. So not saying they didn't have challenges, they certainly did, but no one has requested anything. I'm not aware whether or not any of them have reached out and had county resources or loans or certain things that came through, but nothing has been specifically asked of Corcoran other than some of the minor tweaks that we've been able to help out, say the stanchion for, you know, some additional outside area to get going and those things.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
Yeah, Brad, can when I read this in the first bullet point, spend funds internally, are you suggesting that we have $400,000 of spend that we can internally have within the city? Is that, I don't disagree. I just want to make sure for clarity's sake that you think that that can be spent.
We do, and
Okay.
that certainly would be requiring the use towards public safety expenditures, and that would be my goal. I would bring back that plan to show you, show the council how the funds, how we get to 439,309. I'd present that at the
Okay.
September 10th meeting. But if you're including salaries from Matt, Ryan, Jessica CB, as well as PPE we've been purchasing,
Sure.
technology updates, we're looking at bringing high-speed internet to Public Works because they're having a hard time functioning in this environment with their terrible
Yeah.
service. So we believe the answer is yes.
So then, yeah, I'm fine with that. I just want to make sure also then that if we do spend, $1 today, that there aren't trailing costs. So like at some point we'll regret spending the money because now we got to keep updating and upgrading whatever we bought with that money. And just want to make sure that it's spent in a manner that isn't repeatable, since we won't have this federal money every year.
Yeah, I agree. And one of the recommendations is going to be using funds to upgrade technology in the council chambers. And certainly there's a replacement cost for those technologies. So that's a great point to make.
I guess I kind of tend to agree with the mayor. It would have been nice to spend this money on some improved internet access throughout our city. I don't want to be rushed to spend money and throw it down a rabbit hole to the wrong people and find out we come up with some type of inferior system that doesn't work, and we're just wasting taxpayers' money. My biggest fear, honestly, is, we're supposed to return the funds that aren't spent, but when this COVID dies down and the political system charges up, they're going to become looking for if the spend was a proper use of the money of which was intended. And I don't want to get audited 2-3 years down the road and have to turn around and return $200,000, which we no longer have in our coffers. So I want to be very careful in that if we are creative in how we're spending this money, that we definitely have a hard and fast in stone, this is going to pass muster today, tomorrow, and next year, so that we're not in that position. So that's what I would say to be careful with. I'm not going to get in tonight talking about, how salaries can get into it or not. So I'll wait for what you present and how that spend is, so we can talk about there. But I guess that's my biggest thing, is be careful what you do today, because tomorrow, whoever's in office is going to be looking for money back.
Very true. Just a little side note, I think Brad has been attending a lot of, at least some seminars and training programs on this very issue. So I think he's pretty sensitive to it. So, but I agree, Alan, it's a trap we could fall into. And another item too is that Congressman Phillips was at our mayor's get together last night, and it sounds like there's a big move to have another round of these kinds of funds to be coming out. It's not clear how they'll be structured or what they'll be. So there may be opportunities for, as an example, the internet infrastructure stuff to be helped with by the federal government. So not that we should depend on it, and I'm not sure I even agree with it, but it may be there. So other comments? Okay, hearing none, I guess I would, I guess, you want a motion on this, Brad, or just kind of
No motions required.
consensus?
Just want to know whether there's other earmarking before I brought back a formal plan on September 10th. And just along with Councilmember Schultz's comments there, all cities have been consulting with their city attorney, auditors, getting formal opinions, as well as the guidance is to adopt resolutions that affirm that they meet the criteria, to kind of give yourself layers of protection to to go against that. So at this point, a couple of cities have moved forward, and we're just really have to reaffirm some of the things they're already doing.
Thank you.
Okay, so hearing no other comments, I will assume that, that Brad, you're directed to go put a plan together and come back to the council for approval. Okay. Okay, so now item 10C, which is the unreserved fund balance policy.
Mayor and Council, just real quick here, at our adoption of core strategy, short-term goals and action steps, one of the action steps was for the city of Corcoran to put forth a goal for the unrestricted fund balance. So right now we have a minimum that's in our policies talking about 35% guidelines.
Brad, you're not hitting the mic very well. So.
Sorry, is that better?
Turn your head. I don't think it's coming through.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. So right now we have a 35% minimum fund balance, when right now we're at about 40%. But the council desired to actually set a goal. So in the packet here, I recommended, a soft goal of somewhere between 40 and 50%. I did note for every dollar we increase for the levy, that means that's either 35, 40, or 50 cents additional we have to keep in our reserve coffers too. So just asking the council if you wanted through motion to provide a goal for the fund balance. Jesse, going to move that slide forward too. That's all it was though.
Any comments, questions from council?
Yeah, I have a question, Mayor. If we had a goal of 50% and today we're at 39, is this something that needs to be like one quantum leap, or can we do incremental steps like annually moving towards that and review this annually?
Great question. So Mayor and Council, where this would go if you say, for example, approved a motion with setting a goal for the unrestricted fund balance at 45%, for example, we would note that in our 5-year financial management plan or whatever plan we're using as our goal and just kind of report where we're at, but it would be incremental, absolutely. That's pretty typical where you raise, if you're lucky, 1 or 2% a year and over time. It just shows your benchmark of whether you're getting there or not.
Okay.
Sometimes, Brian, if people are, like if you talk to Moody's or some of the people that rate cities, if they adopt language such as 50% and we're, I don't know, 5% under it, they might penalize us for that.
Sure.
So having big, audacious goals, even though they might benefit the city, sometimes they can say, oh, they didn't make their goal, when all we're trying to do is actually do good stewardship. So there's a balance that we try to maintain in keeping our credit rating good and realistic. So it's better to move it up 1% 3 years in a row than move it up 3% in 1 year.
Sure. Thank you, John.
What's the incremental tax impact for residents by increasing it, say 5% or?
Well, ultimately, it really would have reduced the amount that the council and city could spend on other initiatives, because if you have a cap of how much you're willing to tax people to start with, if you have to keep putting a higher percentage of that towards reserves versus spending on stuff, it certainly does eat away at that incrementally. But I mean, it ultimately comes down to what the total tax levy is, as opposed to what the reserve fund balance is.
And Alan, it's basically whatever, for every 1%, it's 1% of the budget. So of budget dollars. So.
Okay, so it's a direct 1-to-1, basically, of the budget dollars. So.
Right.
Correct. So every dollar we raise for the tax levy, we have to at least levy 35 cents additionally to backfill it.
Yeah, I don't favor getting too aggressive on that, both to John's point and just I think the level of comfort that I have with our staff's ability to put together really good budgets and to control our expenses. I think we're being irresponsible if we get that goal too high, and 50% isn't irresponsibly too high, but I think it's higher than it needs to be. And I'm not sure. Partly to John's point, I think if we don't want to set the goal so high that the bond people start looking at and penalizing us for it. But then the underlying issue is, what do we really need in order to be responsible in our administration of the city funds? And I think if I were to set a goal, I would say between 40 and 45%, and I would say 35% is the absolute minimum. We will not let it go below, but for now, I wouldn't jump up to even 50% as a goal. But that's very subjective, and I'm open to any
Mr. Mayor,
feelings of any other members. Yes.
I just have another, it's maybe more of a procedural question. But if we were at the 35% mark, that's what our goal was, then, and we're currently actually at 39%, how did we actually get 4% more if we're only basically levying $1.35? Was it by not spending as much money, or how did we get that extra 4%?
Correct, Mayor and Council. So that would be generally either cost reductions or exceeding revenues. So
Okay.
we've for surplus budgets, for example, would be the way we've done that.
Okay.
And some of the things we've done, Brian, in the past is when we've had a surplus, we've allocated some of that surplus to the unreserved balance.
Okay, great. All right, thank you.
So I basically had the same question as Brian. So could we look at it more as we have a floor plus a range, and not have a target number?
This is purely a council request from earlier to establish a goal, so you all can do whatever you want to do. It's really just driving me to meet your goals.
I think Brian, or if you read a report, if you read a report as it pertains to our credit rating, having a goal of going from 35 to 36% is viewed very positively by credit rating agencies. And so your question was, why specifically would you have that, or why have any number? Why is it in here? I think it makes us continue to increase our credit ratings, which lowers our borrowing costs. So I would think we'd want to move that. If it's 35 today, we wouldn't want to go up to 40, just because if we don't meet that, it will be a problem. But it will look good because they will note that we had our budget cash balance go up each year or 1% and meet it. So it's sort of like we should have it go. I believe we should have it go up, and make what it is we committed to.
And I'll just add for clarity, we're at 40 right now. So really, if the council established a goal of 40%, essentially we'd hang out here rather than keep putting funds in the reserve. So it's just whether there is a goal or we've met it.
I wouldn't say we go up 1% a year to get to 40, rather than, because they will look at, do we have a history of increasing our cash balance each year? So it's sort of like a little bit of a game, but.
Yep, but John, we're already at 40.
Well, he's saying a stated amount is more beneficial, even if we're already at it, right? Because our stated minimum is 35.
So if we went up 40% this year, we said, oh, we're going to be at 40. And then we didn't increase it for the next 3 years, that wouldn't be as good as if we went up 1% each year, knowing we'll end up in 4 years at 39 or 40%. So maybe I would go up 37%.
You mean for the minimum, John?
Yeah, for the minimum.
Yeah, because right now the actuality, we're at 40%.
We are setting a goal that we already have achieved.
Yeah. So you're saying to raise the minimum from 35% to 37%.
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. And not having.
And even if we hit 42% because of exceeding revenues, revenue expectations, still, that's going to look positive as well. much more positive than if we shoot for a higher goal and barely make it.
Yeah.
So I understand what John's saying, and I really agree with John's perspective.
If I may just jump in, I actually would recommend not touching the bottom number. I think having a minimum amount that we're going to abide by is important, and I think raising that would, if we potentially would drop for some reason, it would show us below our bottom level. I think that could be more damaging to rating agencies. As far as setting a goal, it's really, I think it's helpful to rating agencies that we have one, and it shows whether or not we're achieving that. If, for example, the council said, yep, we'll keep 35 as the minimum and are going to set our goal of 40%, we would be able to show, I think, 7 years now of continued progress that got us to meet our goal. And now we can say to them, yep, we've met our goal. They may and will, in their letter, their rating letter, say, we feel that they should have a higher fund balance, but it's still a really good story because we've shown that we've met and kept our goal. So I wouldn't recommend changing the bottom. I would recommend just whether there is a goal for the city. Otherwise, we're just kind of going year by year.
What if we did this? I think this is in concert with what you're saying, John. What if we just said, let's keep our minimum at 35% and set our goal right now at 40% with the plan of addressing that maybe on a yearly basis. And so maybe next year we would change that to 41% or something like that. Does that make sense, or is that self-defeating?
No, I think, Brad, I can't remember what the range, where we were as far as the range of whether that 35 was considered low by Moody's, or I can't. I thought it was low, but
Yes.
35 to 50 is the typical range. So 35 is their low end. Yes.
Yeah. So I still think we should increase that. If we want to, if the goal is to raise our credit rating, we would increase that. If the credit rating is not the thing we're talking about tonight, then I would agree with you, Ron. I think we're in good shape, and I think even the language is important. So I'm not going to die and say, oh, we've got to have that be 36, but it would help our credit rating, no doubt about it. But so will the language that you say. If we adopt that language, they will read that, and that will make us look good.
What if you had some type of language where you maintain the minimum, but you have a target growth percent, not actual target percentage, but say a 2% growth or 5% growth over the prior years, not to exceed a maximum 10-year change. So you get to your rate that you want if you grow at that rate, but you maintain the minimum.
Percent, go up 1% a year. Any language and guidance that we are able to hit will be attractive. But that's not language that's not language you see all the time.
Right.
I guess I have a concern, just that most of our revenue in the city comes from property owners paying their property tax, and unemployment has been pretty dramatically under a great deal of stress. And I'm wondering, are we likely to see some homeowners not pay their property taxes on a regular basis? Is there a chance where the city is going to have a reduced revenue in the next year or so that would make, that's when we should be using some of these funds, I guess. And are we, if we remain too, just I don't want to be too wild about this, because don't we run the chance of actually having to dip into this reserve?
Correct. So, Mayor and Council, about 84% of our revenue is property tax revenue. The rest is, fees for certain other things. So, in previous downturns, you would likely have delinquent property taxes, meaning people not paying their property taxes. They are delinquent, so they typically come back. There's a 3-year process, and before the property then goes into foreclosure, and the taxes at that point are really gone. But typically, either they get caught up and they get in a future budget. So yes, the reserve would be used in those times when you levied, say, $4 million in property taxes, and you only got 3.5. Well, you didn't get $500,000, which you were supposed to get. Now, ideally, those would come back in future years, and you, in some years, instead of getting 4 million you levy, you actually get 4.2 because you got those from years previous. But these are exactly those types of uses to make sure you can pay the bills during those times.
I think to come somewhat to that point is you don't want to increase your unrestricted balance percent to try to increase your bond rating to save money on borrowing just to only offset it and increase taxes. You're pushing onto the taxpayer to increase the reserve balance. So where that equitable amount is that makes sense for the common taxpayer, I guess, is where we got to land.
Right.
Yep. And I will say the council doesn't have to do anything. We've been operating just fine, and every year we have been having that discussion. This was just something from our that day. It was a discussion point for the council wanted to have.
I mean, how many points do you have to move to actually affect our bond rating?
For a city of Corcoran, it'd be a lot. Our budget's, 40% is it's about $2 million, so it's a number, but we're not going to get to be a AAA bond rating city at a size this small. Our bond rating is very good. Now, that being said, at the last bond rating, you heard Tammy Amdahl say that if it weren't for the pandemic, we probably would have got a rating increase. So everything we're doing is doing just fine. It just provides some guidance to not only staff but future councils of what we're trying to do here. But so again, there's nothing required.
I'm going to make a suggestion. I think we're not broke, and I would suggest we leave it as it is. It's working pretty darn well, and I don't see a need to change it. So anybody feels different, they can make a motion. Hearing no motion, we'll move on to the next item and direct staff to just continue doing what they're doing. It was a good discussion. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Brad, for helping us understand that.
Yeah.
Brad, you didn't expect a motion, did you?
Only if there was direction to change anything.
All right, fair enough.
He didn't feel he didn't feel a need for one, I don't think.
That's fair. Okay.
Oh, that's a good question, John. Yeah. Okay, now speaking more of bonds, item 10D, which is our bond refunding and call opportunities.
Mayor and Council, another finance item, a good finance item. We have two opportunities in front of us. The first one is I think a no-brainer. We have an opportunity refund, which means we basically refinance our 2012B bonds for the Public Works facility. This is about $3.5 million with a 2.7 true interest cost, and we have an opportunity to refinance them at this point. In the packet there's an estimated true interest cost of 1.4%. I will note the bonds we sold a couple months ago, we actually landed at 0.83. So there's somewhat potential for even more savings than this, but we have two options here. One is to keep the existing term and lower the payments. That saves about $400,000 over the term. The second is to reduce the term of the bond by 1 year. And with that, there are actually some additional annual savings. It's a little more over the term, $460,000 for that opportunity. Next slide, Jess. The second opportunity is to actually call bonds. And these, we could call at any time, but they're getting at a point where they're approachable for us. So the bond series 2012A, there's $131,000 left we'd have to pay off. If we paid it off, we would reduce our interest by about $2,500. It has an annual payment of about $49,000. And then there's also 2014A, which had a higher interest. And if we paid that one off at $192,000, that would save us $12,000. So for $60,000 more, we can have a significant, more of a significant impact. And that would actually be paid off $52,000 a year early for the next couple years. So this does specifically relate to our previous conversation in which we would actually have to use some of our reserves to make one of these payments, either at 130 or 192. I had a conversation with Tammy about what we just talked about. Okay, if we do that, it's going to reduce our reserves from, call it 39, 40% down to 37%. So next time when we issue bonds, we'll have to actually show them we dropped our reserves. And the conversation we have is that it's a really good story to say that, yep, it did, but that's because we bought bonds off early and saved us some money, and we'll just build that back quickly over time. And that's a good story actually for the bond rating agencies. So my recommendation would be to move forward with the refunding of the 2012B bonds. And my recommendation is to not shorten the term, just take the annual savings at this point. And as well as calling the 2014A bonds, which is $192,000 in cash coming forward. The 2012B refunding process, it's the same as a full bond sale. So it does include a rating call and everything else. So it does cost money. Those costs are baked into those savings. So happy to answer any questions, and we'll take your recommendation and move forward accordingly.
Okay. Any comments, questions?
Yeah, Brad and I had a conversation about issuing costs. There's 40 to get all this done. Brad, was the issuing, it was 40 grand. Was that on the recommendation, you know, the refund 2012B and the call 2014A all in, or was it piecemeal with all these different strategies?
Thank you. Good question. That was only for the refunding of the 2012B. For when we call bonds, there's a cost of $600. So there would be a cost, again, $600 for the call of the bonds.
What about the reissuing of them at the new rate?
Oh, so again, going back to the Public Works refunding option, that's all in. So those costs include the bond counsel, Moody's rating process, and Northland Securities costs for all those.
Okay.
And that's factored into the true cost interest?
I believe that, no, that's factored into the par amount of the bonds. So you're
Okay.
actually factoring that into how much you're borrowing or refinancing essentially. Kind of like when you refinance a house, you typically roll your $5,000 for the cost back into it again.
Okay. I had a question. There was a 2012A bond for 130,000, and then we had a 2014 A bond for 190. We're only calling one of those bonds as the recommendation?
Thank you. Correct. I just didn't think we want to dip that much into our reserves for an extra savings of, you know, $2,500 more. I think if we take advantage of the one and save, you know, $12,000, that's a good financial move.
Okay.
Other questions?
Why are you recommending that it's the same length of term? Is it just for the increased annual savings?
Yeah, as I wrote in the report, the council at the time, and the mayor was on the council, they really felt they actually purposefully did a really long term on those bonds. And the thought process was it's all the growth taking place in the city that required that new building, and it'll allow for more residents to be involved and help pay for that later on in the terms versus early in the terms. It actually was also structured to have interest only payments, I think, for the first couple of years. So the mayor can add on to that conversation if you want, but I was just trying to reflect on the intent of the council at that time.
Yeah, and that does really reflect it. I mean, we purposely said the need for it is, as Brad said, the need for it is for future citizens. Let's let the future citizens participate in the cost. So I agree. It's only 1 year on the difference, but I think leaving the term the same is consistent with what our thinking was when we started it out, and I don't see any change to that in my mind. So,
but in shortening it 1 year, we still have an annual savings on the interest over what we're currently paying, correct? Or
Correct, because it's not a perfect 1 year savings amount. So they cut 1 year off. You can't cut partial years off. So instead, they kind of backed in those savings throughout. So And overall, it does save more over the term. I was just kind of reflecting on the intent, like I said. So either, there's no wrong answer.
No, yeah, I'm just, and looking, I just want to make sure I understand the one option where we shorten the term 1 year. We're continually in those years up until the end of the term, we're continually saving over what our current costs are, right? It's not as much as the 20,000 that's marked annually on keeping the same term, but there is, a few thousand here and there. And then the bulk of the savings comes at the end of the term.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Yep. So for example, taking a year off next year still would be $1,600 less.
Yeah.
But it'd be $25,000 less next year if you took the annual savings earlier. But that's the current difference. And then there's, yes, bulk savings at the end.
I guess for me, the increment, the additional savings monthly, I mean, if we did nothing, we wouldn't incur that savings anyway. So by shortening the term, we're still we're still seeing that savings on an annual basis, not as significant, but the significance is huge at the end of the term with the shortened term. So my suggestion would be we shorten the term because we're still saving on an annual basis. We're just saving those future generations a larger chunk.
Again, there's not a right or wrong on this, so what's the rest of the council's position on it?
I think I like the logic of the original city council to let future residents, there'll be an additional cadre of new residents in that last year to help pay for it. And so I'm happy to leave the term as it is. I don't feel the need to shorten the term. I don't disagree with Alan that it would be, a chunk of cash at the end, but I think leaving it that long is solid.
And the other part, in my mind, is these are extremely low interest rates, and to lock them in for a longer period of time is not
a bad thing.
It seems better to me than not. So I still favor the longer term.
I don't mind paying off those high, refunding the high interest rates, and I think we could massage this 100 different ways.
Exactly.
We'd end up with savings, and I don't know. It
just seems
good.
To me,
the thing is, we didn't let it slide in a low interest rate environment.
Yeah.
So I'm fine with the staff recommendation. Do we have to make that decision tonight, Brad?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
I would just say one more thing. To me, if I knew I could shorten my mortgage by 1 year and save $60,000 at the end of the term, I'd do it. That's ultimately what we're doing, is we're shortening it by a year just and saving another 60 grand.
You can do that on your own mortgage. You just make a bigger payment this year.
Yeah, I know.
It's the same thing.
Donations my way.
Yeah. You just pay. It ends up shortening because you pay principal off faster.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
Which is the same thing we're going to do with refunding the 2012B.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
I will selfishly say that another reason for the recommendation is I still have to cut like 120,000 from the budget for next year from you guys. So I was thinking I could help you another 20 grand.
It would.
All right. I'll go for that.
Okay. I'll entertain a motion to accept staff's recommendation as presented to refund the bonds under option 1 and to call the bond series 2014A bonds.
So moved, Bottoма.
Second, Schultz.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Brad, we do love you, don't we? Yeah.
Signify by saying aye. Thomas, aye. Anderson,
Aye.
Bottoма,
Aye.
Lothar,
Aye.
and Schultz.
Aye.
Good. Thanks for a good discussion, guys.
So Brad, can I ask you, next year would we still have the opportunity to maybe call the other bond if we had enough unrestricted funds?
Correct.
Okay. If the interest rates are still low.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah.
Yep. So I mean, this will obviously help future budgets too. It's $70,000 really a year for 4 years, and then $20,000 still after that. So this is helping the next 4 years budgets by taking this action.
It's a great move and a good opportunity. So, good job. Okay, item 10E, which is the 2021 capital improvement plan purchases. Now we're going to spend all that money.
Yeah. I'll kick it over to Kevin, then he'll kick it to Matt.
Thanks, Brad. Thanks, Mayor and Council. Before you tonight, we are presenting 4 of the 2021 capital improvement plan purchases that were approved back in February, I believe, of this year. And they include a track excavator, a 3/4 ton pickup with plow, trail maintenance equipment from Public Works, and a CSO truck from the police department. The primary reason that we're bringing this forward about mid-year, or 2/3 of the way through the year, is that with COVID and the CARES Act and all the other potentials, there's a strong demand out there for equipment, and we're hearing from vendors that there's long lead times in this equipment, and with the goal of trying to acquire some of these pieces of CIP equipment in 2021, we wanted to get those orders in place sooner than later. So we can make sure we have them in time. The lead times vary and it's first come, first serve. So that's really the primary reason why we're maybe a couple months ahead of schedule. The really only major difference on price, as you can see here on the screen, the highlighted ones are what we're talking about, is the track excavator came in roughly $22,000 under the approved expense. And that savings will be redirected to other approved CIP funds, so it will remain in the CIP for equipment or other stuff that you guys would approve at some point in the future. So with that, I will let Matt jump in if he's got any questions, or if I missed anything, or we'd be happy to answer any questions on specifics you might have.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. Yeah, same thing with for the CSO vehicle. We reached out to the vendors, and they said they didn't have the exact pricing yet for the specific vehicles we were looking at. They are getting the 3/4 ton pricing in, as you've probably heard. But they did say that with vehicles, and it's actually further up in the supply chain where they're seeing significant delays. And they said recommended getting orders in sooner than later. I know other cities that were looking for squad car replacements were told they were sometimes over 16 months out, which is hard to believe. And I'm confident or hopeful that we can, the pickups won't be as delayed. But I think the message was clear from them to order it as soon as you possibly can if you want to get in line, since they're filled in order of request.
Okay. Any questions from council?
Yeah, I have a question. I have heard rumors that CARES Act, you can buy vehicles with it under the guise of, or I guess the theory of, we can't have people sharing a vehicle. So if there's any way we can buy any of this with CARES money, I would be all for it.
Sure. So that's something that's been talked about at the staff level. One of the items that's very clear on capital purchases with CARES funding is it cannot be for previously budgeted equipment. And with these items were already borrowed for and included in the 2020-2021 CIP, but we have looked at CARES funding as possible options for unbudgeted capital expenditures like vehicles that could be used to address primarily that COVID response as is required by the grant, but also would alleviate that burden for future Corcoran.
Okay. So we budgeted for the 2021 stuff already. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, the 2020 and 2021 capital plan was already bonded for and in our possession.
Okay. All right. Thank you for the clarification.
So it's a good thought, and it may be included. Another vehicle may be included when we come back to you on September 10th for just that reason. But we're thinking about it.
Yeah. And really for the public's information, this is equipment that we've looked at for quite some time and have approved in the past for the purchase, and so it's just being brought up for approval. So it's not these aren't new things, and they're being bought according to our longstanding policies for how we refresh our equipment and for our previously looked at needs assessments. So it's been gone through quite thoroughly.
Yeah, that's a good point, Mayor, that we looked at this before we even went out with bonds. I just have one question for clarification. So I can't remember the answer to this. Trail maintenance equipment, why is that bonded for and not coming out of Parks and Trails funds? So, I mean, is there a reason that
Yeah, you can't
because
use parks,
this is like you can't use park dedication funds for maintenance equipment?
Right.
Okay, it has to be for creation of new.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you for that clarifying that.
Anything else? Okay, I guess I'll entertain a motion to approve the 2020-2021 CIP purchase orders for the track excavator, the 3/4 ton pickup with plow, trail maintenance equipment, and a CSO truck as presented.
So moved, Anderson.
Second, Lothar.
Did you get that, Jessica? Okay. Any further discussion?
Yeah, can I ask a question? Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
So is all, I just want clarification. Is all of this bonded for?
Mayor and Council, not all of it. So there's a cash component as well as a bonding component. So we've been working over time to get to a point where we could cash all of these.
Yes.
Which I think would be a fortunate place to be, because then we wouldn't be tied to a 2-year bonding cycle. But this does include bonding. We're probably still at least 50% bonding funds, if not more. But we're increasing that every year to get to a cash plan as soon as we can.
Yeah, okay. I know that we've been working on that. So for example, bonding for a 30,000 foot or $30,000 lawnmower with a life of 5 years doesn't always make sense. I don't know if we itemize this when we bond for it, but I should have asked for that clarification earlier. But it is helpful to know for the public that that historically the council has moved away from bonding for this kind of stuff and paying upfront for it, which is not, that started happening long before I was on council, and it's good to know that that continues to happen.
A great point, John. I think we on the council get close to this and forget about that's what's going on in the background. But yeah, and it's a great point to let people know that we are moving away from bonding for short-term items, and that's a policy that we've put in place some time back. So
yeah,
thanks,
okay,
John.
thank you.
Thanks, John. That's good. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Thomas, aye. Anderson,
Aye.
Bottom,
Aye.
Lothar,
Aye.
and Schultz.
Aye.
Great, thanks. Thank you, staff. Thank you, Kevin and Matt and Brad and Jessica and everybody. Okay, on to item 11A, which is the staff reports code enforcement update. You're muted, Brad.
I was just telling Jess to do what she did. Thank you. So just a code enforcement update. We'll try to keep you updated on a fairly regular basis. We still do have 18 cases open from 2019. Those were in the courts. Unfortunately, the courts are doing about nothing right now with code enforcement. So far this year, we do have 70 violations that we've been working on, with 46 still open. This map is slightly updated from the one in the packet. There were a couple missed items that we found that got colored in here, but again, no action required or requested of the council. We're trying to, as much as we went to this new format, that was really relying on getting action the city quicker, and that they weren't going to comply, go to the courts to get action. That's really not working these days. Against, we're almost kind of going backwards a little bit, trying to have a few more conversations before we get to the courts as much as possible, because again, they're not doing anything, and our goal is compliance. We don't want anybody to have to go see a judge or anything else, but sometimes that's the only way to get these rectified. So the team did go out again, I think today actually, so and check these. So that doesn't reflect the tour today of any more in compliance, and I can follow up with that. But just a general update, and we'll keep moving forward. I did give Westside Tire until Monday, August 31st to get their plan in place for coming into compliance, and that would come to the council thereafter. I know Councilmember Schultz has had some conversations with Sean, and I've been obviously willing to meet with him as well, but I'll just update you on that too. That's all I have.
Is this is part of a several-year plan to review compliance through the whole city?
Miracles, this is really a primary initiative that began just last year, as far as really doing proactive code enforcement versus just dealing with complaints that came through. So like last year was pretty successful, and this year's just been a little more difficult. One, we put everything on hold for a couple months, so we stopped doing everything. So we are kind of, I would say, at delayed high peak of violations, because we kind of got to the game late, and now we're trying to deal with everything from this year. But really, it's the goal of doing an annual sweep every year and keeping these tamped down as much as possible. And then whether the council has certain priorities or not, we address that every year as well.
Because it looks like you're picking on my part of town. But you'll get to the rest of them.
Oh, the red. You're talking about the roads driven.
Yes.
Driven roads.
Yes.
Area.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm up there too, Tom.
You're up there too. Yeah, our part of town up there. Yeah.
Well, we know where to go. Nail those troublemakers.
I have them drive past council members' homes first.
That's good, as it should be. Yep.
Yeah.
I got a ticket last year.
Okay.
I'm not immune.
Yeah, none of us are. Okay. On to item 11B, which is a pandemic response update.
Matt, you want to go first?
Sure, I can kick it off. So we're just over 62,000 cases in Minnesota, just under 20,000 in Hennepin County now. And the longer this goes on, obviously there's still a lot of uncertainty, but there's been talk lately about really trying to understand where we're at in different scenarios and different planning aspects. I'm sure you've all heard about models that were not successful in accurate predictions. And now that they're getting more data, they're working on really trying to clarify where we're going. And you know, some of the talk from the beginning is what scenario is this pandemic following? So one of them is a peaks and valleys, where there's fairly even peaks. And that they've indicated that that model would actually create the longest disruption. Another option was where there was a second wave that was actually larger than the first one, which they indicated would probably be the most dangerous scenario. And that would be the second peak that you would be seeing us in right now. And then the second would be a slow burn scenario, where you saw the initial peak followed by just slight waves afterwards, which would be the least dangerous. So those were the three that they were waiting for. And as they're gathering data, they're starting to become more clear to them that they believe we're in the peaks and valleys scenario, which is subsequent peaks that are very similar in size, which in good news isn't the worst or most dangerous scenario. The bad news is that is also the longest disruption scenario. So it's a little bit frustrating on that regard, but as that data continues to come in and get analyzed, and this is, you know, they can actually base this off of what they're really seeing. That's what they kind of believe is happening now. So if that gives any clearer picture, that's kind of what they're asking people to start look at their forward-looking decision-making on, as they look at the historical data that we've now collected. So as far as from a staffing level, we're seeing agencies and cities continuing to be impacted. Their employees are usually impacted in clusters. So you're seeing, you know, it'd be a whole handful of cops, a night shift being disrupted, or a detective division, or an accounting division in a city, or something like that, mostly because of proximity. And so it's really just kind of reinforces the abundance of caution in the PPE stuff, and just how you carry yourself throughout the day. But that's how cities are starting to see the impact is really in the clusters of people. On the PD front specifically, we're short-staffed, but it's not COVID related. We're still looking at ways to address that. Obviously, if that ends up getting compounded with COVID, we're gonna need support from some surrounding agencies, and we have those contingencies in place with our lakes area. We're continuing to meet with them on a monthly basis now, and still keeping a good contact and good plan in place. And we have assigned incident commanders and deputy incident commanders 24/7, 365. So if we do have to go into a cooperative staffing plan, those responsible for it are identified and would then roll it out for our entire region. So if you're interested in any more details on that, let me know and I'd be happy to talk through it, but I can turn it over to Brad or Jessica for any other city updates they might have.
Thanks, Matt. And just a couple updates, and I'll take in this one, wait for Jessica, and she can answer questions regarding it. But regarding City Hall, we had a fairly successful opening the last couple weeks. We were basically required to be open normal time for the election. I will just take a brief sidebar to say Jess and her team did an exceptional job managing a election during a pandemic. And it worked really well, of course, with the election judges too. So they're really well prepared. There's 3 precincts to run around instead of 1 again. So a lot of extra work going in. And not only that, it was the last day of candidate filing for council and mayor. So, and she has to deal with that. So thanks to whoever made those dates on the same, I guess. But with our plan, I'd really challenge Jessica to come up with a plan where we could be open as much as possible. However, we're stuck with our staffing levels as well as dealing with the pandemic itself in a safe manner. And what Jessica's really came up with moving forward for the short term is turning to a 9 to 1 opening Monday through Friday for City Hall beginning next week. And continue that moving forward. I think September 18th is the next date when absentee or early voting, whatever they call it, Jess knows the term, we have to be back open again for that time period. It gives us a few weeks to operate 9 to 1. It allows for certain employees to be in the morning to help out with, but also closes us up so we can have less exposure to. Jessica's chose this based upon data she's seeing with people coming in and also the needs of the organizations. And again, if you want to have any questions, she can answer them, but that's the plan moving forward next week, 9 to 1, Monday through Friday. And we'll, of course, communicate that website, everything else. Other update I have is, I think I shared this via email, I did approve the stanchion to have their outdoor space. So again, as per council directive at the next council meeting, I'm updating you on the record that I did approve that. There are a few tweaks they need to make with the shelter itself, but it seems to be going okay. Then finally, as mentioned earlier, we will be coming back to you with a CARES Act use plan, funding plan at the September 10th meeting, and we'll go from there. So that's all the update I have.
Great, thanks. Any questions from council? I would just say, as always, good job, staff, and continue with the good work, and let everyone know we appreciate your efforts and all the employees and people at City Hall, especially election judges. That was a good that we had good support there.
We did.
Okay, item 11C, the added item, which is Charter Commission update.
Mayor and Council, it's just an update as far as the Charter Commission. I had a meeting and the Charter Commission really is going to want to continue the discussion on potential awards for the city of Corcoran. And this has been something that's been talked about for a couple of years now. But the reason I bring it up is just the fact that it's going to create or require some staff time, myself, Jessica, and it will likely incur some costs with the city attorney. Now, there's no budget for the Charter Commission, but they obviously have a right to work and do their job, which takes staff time and attorney time occasionally. But at the same point, they don't allocate resources. So I'm really just kind of teeing this up so you all are aware. And if one or all of you had significant issues with them spending a little bit of staff time and money, to make that statement now, or if you don't, that's basically your blessing for them to do a little work later this year. So I just wanted to give an update regarding that discussion potentially moving forward. And it sounds like there might be a September meeting of the Charter Commission, but as it all comes together, of course, I'll keep everyone in the loop.
Can I ask you a question?
Certainly.
What constitutionally is it allowed for a city council who's going to be impacted by the Charter Commission's decision, such as this one? Do we even have the authority to deny such a request?
I don't know.
It would,
Okay.
I'm on your page, John. It would seem like it's counterintuitive that the charter is supposed to be overseeing us. That's why we have a charter city. And for us to be able to limit their role just doesn't seem right to me. And I think I hesitate to even try to take on that role. I
don't
think
even, I don't even know if we can state an opinion about it. I
Yeah,
suppose we can because we live here, but
yeah, my opinion, unless somebody wants to jump into it and take a stand, I favor letting the Charter Commission do what they're going to do. They have a right to do that, as far as I'm concerned. And if somebody feels different, they should let it be known. So anyway, I guess we were informed, and that's all. We don't have to take any action. And
right.
as you say, John, we probably don't have authority to take it, or may not have authority to take action. So it's not, and we don't need to rack up a bunch of legal fees to find out unless somebody is worried about it. It would be good to get some background information on that for general background for all the council, as far as what the charter's role is and what their responsibilities and what our role is in interacting with them, because it's kind of in the 24 years or 6 years that I've been involved, it's we've never had any conflicts or issues, but it would be good to know if that did happen, if there was a conflict, what who's going to come on top. So anyway, thanks, Brad. And I certainly want to express my thanks to the Charter Commission for the work that they do, because it does provide a role, oversight role, and they do put some effort into it. So. Okay, moving on to item 12, which is the 2020 council schedule.
Mayor and Council, lots of planning items. Next meeting, Eagle Brook Church is scheduled to come back, as well as a couple other items, including an updated concept plan from the Cook Lake development that's just north of Lions Park, Paulson Farms final plat, and a few other things. And Nelson Trucking will be pushed back to September because the Planning Commission tabled that item. The other thing, I did hear back from most of you regarding a potential work session for that conversation on the size and limitations of structures in residential districts. And if it's, it looks like perhaps before the September 24th meeting makes the most sense to have that. So if the council's interested, we could schedule a work session for 6 p.m. on September 24th. I'm actually not off, I think, there. So that'd be either for the mayor to call, if there's a consensus of the council that'd be a good day for that discussion.
So
I will not be there. Oh, sorry, Ron.
No, go ahead. I'm just looking for the feedback. So
John? I will not be there September 10th. At that meeting, I will be gone.
You'll be gone September 24th?
No, it's September 10th.
I think he was suggesting it's 24th, weren't you, Brad?
No, I'm just saying it generally. It's my ADD kicking in. I'm just going different, totally different topic.
Irrespective of the issue we're talking about, you won't be there September 10th.
I will not be there.
Okay. Good to know, John. Thank you. Anybody else? Can everybody make it? Does everybody?
Yes.
24th is good. Yep.
24th is good for me.
I'll be there the 10th too. So.
Yeah. That's good to know, Tom.
Thank you.
Okay, I will then call a meeting for for September 24th at 6 p.m. to discuss the building sizes and residential utilizations.
So the September 10th issue, since the recreational vehicle ordinance, and I sort of preliminarily wrote it, maybe I'm totally fine with not being part of the discussion, and if I happen to be there, not be there, but
I think you should move it. Yeah.
I'll move it.
Yeah, let's move it.
Yeah, nobody's going to carry the water on that, John. So
Alan is.
I got a bucket.
Okay, so you'll move that, Brad? Okay. He said yes, even though he was muted. So, okay, so that's it for the schedule. And any other business? No other business from staff, anything from council? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So
Make a
moved.
motion.
Quad.
But he wants out.
Second.
Did you
Anderson.
get something, Jessica? I think it was Anderson moved it and Bottom seconded it.
There we go.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, all right. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Thomas, aye. Anderson,
Aye.
Bottom,
Aye.
Lothar,
Aye.
and Schultz.
Aye.
Great, thank you. Thanks for a good job from staff and council. Very
Nice
well
meeting.
done.
Good to see you.
Have
Good
a
meeting.
good
Thanks
couple
all.
weeks.
Thank you, everybody.
Take care.
I think
Bye.
we're getting this Zoom thing down.